Alright guys, welcome back to another video. This is going to be one of the hardest videos I have, and probably the one that will make a bunch of people mad. Today I'm going to be doing the top 10 wide receivers going into the 2022 NFL season. Now just to clarify, this is not who's going to have the best season in 2022 or who I think is going to be the best wide receiver in 2022. This is going from who had the best season last year, or who did the best last year, or who was the best last year, and who I think from last year can translate it into next year, if that makes sense. And this list is hard. The honorable mentions that I have are a lot. I am not going to have DK Metcalf on this list. He gets an honorable mention. No Tyler Lockett, Deontay Johnson, Chris Godwin, Tyler Boyd. No DeAndre Hopkins, and my reason for no DeAndre Hopkins is he's missing the first 6 games, and he was injured last year. So I just don't think, like, you could count him as much. I think he will be on this list for sure next year, but I think just even though he's been so good the last couple of years, I think that because he misses the first 6 games this season and last season he didn't have the best year, I think I'm gonna give him have to have him off for this year. No Gabe Davis, no Mike Williams, no Jalen Waddle, no Amari Cooper, no Hunter Renfrow, and no Hollywood Brown. And this is where things start to get interesting. Coming in at number 10, we have the reigning offensive player of the year, or offensive rookie of the year. We have Ja'Marr Chase. I think that Ja'Marr Chase will for sure climb up this list next year, possibly even going as high as being a top 5 quarterback or wide receiver, maybe even a top 3, but I doubt he'll climb that high. Ja'Marr Chase had the best rookie season of any wide receiver ever. He had 81 receptions for 1,455 yards, 13 touchdowns, and averaged 18 yards per reception. That is just insane, and I understand, like, he's only done it 1 year, and some people want to see him do it next year, but I think he'll still do it next year, and if not, then I guess I will be corrected. Um, yeah, so I think that he's for sure a top 10 receiver, and anyone who says otherwise, unless he just has a miserable collapse this upcoming season, I just don't agree with. Moving on to number 9, we have Scary Terry himself, Terry McLaurin. And Scary Terry has just been insane the last couple of years. In 2019, his rookie year, he had 58 receptions for 919 yards and 7 touchdowns. And that was with, I believe that was Taylor Heinicke as his quarterback. Or if I'm not mistaken, it might have also have been Alex Smith. I can't remember. But that is just insane to me. Then in 2020, with for sure Taylor Heinicke, he had 87 receptions for 1,118 yards and 4 touchdowns. Kind of dropped down on the touchdown receptions, but also coming in last year, he had 77 receptions for 1,500 or 1,053 yards and 5 touchdowns. Again, a little lower on the touchdown receptions, but if you watch that Chargers game, the play he made where he kept his toes in, flipped around, and somehow still managed to catch the ball is just insane. And I think that he's going to be a great receiver for a long time. Moving on to number 8, we have Keenan Allen. And Keenan Allen, I think, has always been a great receiver ever since coming into the league in 2015 or 2013. He has been, other than 2016 when he was injured, from 2017 to 2021, there was 1 year where he didn't get 1,000 yards, and that year he got 992 and still had 8 touchdowns. Last year he had 1,138 yards for 6 touchdowns. 2019, 1,199 yards for 6 touchdowns. He's just insane. And that was when he had, 2019, he had a broken down Phillip Rivers who could barely throw anything. In 2018, he had a broken, like a beginning to break Phillip Rivers for 1,196 yards and 6 touchdowns. And in 2020 and 2021, he had Justin Herbert throwing him the ball, the best 2-season quarterback of all time. I think that Keenan Allen will do wonders for the Chargers. He always has been helping them out and making them really good. And I think that with him on the team for the next few years, his team's wide receiver core will be pretty great. Moving on to number 7, I have A.J. Brown. He was recently traded to the Philadelphia Eagles, as we know in the blockbuster trade of this draft. And they immediately gave him a 4-year, $100 million extension. I just think that he's a great quarterback, or great wide receiver. He's been in the league since 2019. And other than last year when he missed, I think it was 4 games or 3 games or something like that, every season he's had 1,000 yards other than last season. He had 2019, his rookie year, he had 1,051 yards and 8 touchdowns on 52 receptions, which is just insane. And then in 2020 was when he really popped off. 70 receptions for 1,075 yards and 11 touchdowns. And then last season, he had 63 receptions for 869 yards and 5 touchdowns. A little bit lower on the yards, but he did miss a couple of games. And I think that in the high-flying Eagles offense, he will be just outstanding. He's very, very fast, very, very strong, very, very fantastic player, and I really like watching him, but he barely doesn't make my top 5. And he comes in at number 7. Moving on and coming in at number 6, I want to put this guy in the top 5 so bad, but I think that with the wide receivers that we have this year, I think that there's just too many to keep this guy from making the top 5. Unfortunately, I have Mike Evans. And Mike Evans has been fantastic. He played really, really well in 2019 when he had Jameis Winston. In 2019, he had 67 receptions for 1,157 yards and 8 touchdowns. In 2020, when he had Tom Brady, he had 70 receptions for 1,006 yards and 13 touchdowns. And in 2021, he had 74 receptions for 1,035 yards and 14 touchdowns. Guy is just a monster. His hands are insane. Very, very fast, very strong. He's not the fastest, but he is very fast still. He just is so good at catching the ball with his hands, breaking the routes. He just has to be like one of the best receivers in the league, I think. I would love to put him in the top 5, but I think these 5 receivers I have are just slightly better than Mike Evans is. That being said, coming in at number 5, and this pains me to put him in at number 5, I think he should be a little bit higher, but I just can't, in well respect, put him higher than these 4 players. I have Stefon Diggs. Stefon Diggs is absolutely insane, and he had Kirk Cousins throwing him the ball his first season, or one of his first seasons with the Vikings before he got traded to the Bills. And he had, that season in 2019, he had 63 receptions for 1,130 yards and 6 touchdowns, which is just wow. Then his first season in Buffalo, he had 127 receptions, 1,535 yards, and 8 touchdowns, which is just insane to think about. Now, ever since the number 1 wide receiver for the Bills, he's made that offense what it is. And then last season, he had 103 receptions for 1,225 yards and 10 touchdowns. And I think he will be just one of the best receivers in the league forever. He recently signed a contract extension that will keep him in Buffalo until he retires, and I am very, very happy that he has signed that for him. And I think that he is a top 5 receiver, but I just can't, with all these other players on the list, put him higher than number 5, unfortunately. That being said, moving on to number 4, and this is probably where people disagree with me. These next 4 can go in any other order, but I have Tyreek Hill at number 4. I think Tyreek Hill is one of the best receivers. He is the fastest receiver in the league, I think, and he has just been an amazing receiver since 2016. Out of 2016, there has been 2 seasons, which was his rookie season and 2019, where he did not reach 1,000 yards. But in the season, every other season, he's reached 1,000 yards. 2017, 75 receptions for 1,183 yards and 7 touchdowns. 2018, 87 receptions for 1,479 yards and 12 touchdowns. 2020, 87 receptions for 1,276 yards and 15 touchdowns. And last year, 111 receptions for 1,239 touchdowns and 1,239 yards and 9 touchdowns. Guy is just insane. He's been kind of talking up Tua, which I don't know if he's just blowing smoke up everyone or if he's just being serious, but he can take little slant routes and he's gone. He has some of the best feet in the NFL. He is probably the best route runner. I think that he is one of the best receivers, but I cannot, in good faith, put him above at least 2 of these other receivers. There's one that is up for debate, and that's going to be my number 3, but I think that he's just, as of right now, just a little bit under my number 3, purely because he's a little bit older than my number 3. But yeah, I think that he is a top 5 receiver for sure. Could be argued top 2 or top 3, but I think for sure top 4. And yeah, I have him at number 4. Moving on to number 3, I have probably my most debated one. I have Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson destroys secondaries. He's destroyed the Packers secondary. He destroys the Bears secondary. The Lions secondary. He destroys everyone. He torched the Steelers last season which I thought was probably one of the reasons why we lost. We could have probably came back in that game if there wasn't some, drama stuff, but not important. Justin Jefferson torches every secondary. He is fantastic. And he has the most yards of any wide receiver in 2 seasons, and the most touchdowns of any wide receiver in his first 2 seasons, and the most catches, the highest average yards per catch. It's just insane. He has, in 2020, where the Vikings traded Stephon Diggs to the Bills and then drafted Justin Jefferson, he had 88 receptions for 1,400 yards and 7 touchdowns, and then got robbed by Justin Herbert, who I think didn't really deserve to get Offensive Player of the Year, or Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think it could have been Justin Jefferson. But then, in 2021, he popped off with 108 receptions for 1,616 yards and 10 touchdowns. And I think that is just insane. I think that he's going to be a very good receiver for the next few years, and maybe even the next decade, and I think that he is going to be a fantastic receiver for a very long time. Is he really better than Tyreek Hill? I'm not entirely certain yet. I just have him better or higher right now because I think he's younger and he has a little bit more upside, even though Tyreek Hill is faster. I just think that for right now, if I was drafting players of their current age, I think I would take Justin Jefferson over Tyreek Hill currently. Moving on to number 2, we have the best wide receiver season of all time, or one of the best, and that's Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp had one of the best wide receiver years ever. He was fantastic, absolutely amazing under Matthew Stafford. He also came from Eastern Washington University, so that's pretty cool. And he's just insane. In 2021, he had 145 receptions for 1,947 yards and 16 touchdowns. And he even played good under Jared Goff. In 2019, he had 94 receptions for 1,161 yards and 10 touchdowns. And yeah, he's been over 500 yards every season. He's been over 750 for 4 years out of the 5, or 5 years out of the 6, I think. From what I can tell, the only one he wasn't over 700 yards was 2018, and he had 566 yards on 48 receptions for 6 touchdowns, which I think is still really good. And the dude's only 29, so he can only skyrocket from here. I think he's going to be doing fantastic. Maybe not nearly as good as almost 2,000 yards, but yeah, for next season, I think I could definitely see him dropping off a little bit, but not nearly as much as people are acting like. And yeah. And then coming in at number 1, this is where people are going to be probably a bit upset, but I have Davante Adams. The reason I have Davante Adams is if you look from 2019 or 2020 and 2021, he has 29 touchdowns, which is some of the most touchdown numbers, or the highest touchdown numbers in 2 seasons for any player. He has like 2,800 yards or 2,900 yards, which is super high, 250 receptions, which is super, super high. He's just an insane player. In 2020, he had 115 receptions for 1,374 yards and 18 touchdowns, which is crazy. And then in 2021, he had 123 receptions for 1,553 yards and 11 touchdowns, which is also just crazy. I think he's going to be doing really good on the Raiders. I think people are just going to underrate him a little bit now that he doesn't have probably one of the best quarterbacks of all time throwing him the ball. He has Derek Carr, who's not a bad quarterback by any means, but he's definitely not a good quarterback. Yeah, and if you look at who people call the best quarterback of all time, or the best wide receiver, they're going to say Davante Adams currently. Ask Jalen Ramsey. There's all kinds of secondary players who in the league who don't want to be on Davante Adams because they're just afraid that he's going to torch them. Yeah, he's been insane. He does only have 3 1,000+ yard reception or seasons, but he has 2 other 997 yard seasons and 1 850 yard season, and then his first 2 seasons he had like 450 yards, which isn't terrible and not great, but I think he's the best wide receiver right now, and I think if anyone denies that, they're just wrong. He is so good and such a good route runner. He always knows how to take the chunk of the load because he had to do that for the last couple of years while the Packers didn't have that good of a wide receiver core. And yeah, he comes in at my number 1 wide receiver. And with that being said, that's going to be all I have for today, or for this video. I think within the next hour and a half, I will try to have my 53-man roster for the Steelers reaction. That'll be pretty cool, I think. And yeah, that's all, guys. Thanks.